Over to you, Madhuji. Madhuji, your mic. Hello, Madhuji.
Okay, sorry, I didn't unmute myself. My apologies, friends. Namaste, Manushi ke mitron ko mera namaskar. Friends, this is the second in a series of 5 webinars being organized by Manushi to commemorate the 100th anniversary of one of the most decisive and gruesome chapters in the history of modern India, namely the 2-month-long Moplah massacre of Hindus and conversions through barbaric means in the Malabar region of Kerala at the hands of Moplah Muslims, starting August 1921. In the inaugural session on August 4, Sandeep Balakrishna had traced the history and background of the jihadi violence unleashed on innocent and totally unarmed, unprepared Hindus in Malabar. We will be posting his video very soon on YouTube, as will all other videos be put out through the Manushi YouTube channel. Sandeep's lecture clearly showed that the 1921 massacre and forced conversions were the logical culmination of M.K. Gandhi's zealous support to the Khilafat movement launched by Shaukat Ali, Maulana Muhammad Ali, Hakim Ajmal Khan, and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Sandeep also quoted contemporary sources to describe the actual nature of the violence unleashed without any provocation whatsoever on behalf of Malabar Hindus, including ground reports by Congress leaders such as Annie Besant, who went personally investigate the atrocities. The very heart-rending letter of Rani of Nilambur describing the atrocities suffered by men, women, and children of her community in a letter to Lady Reading, and a first-hand account written by Diwan Bahadur C. Gopalan Nair, retired deputy collector of Calicut, who wrote really a spine-chilling first-person account of the barbarities suffered by Hindus in his book, The Moplah Rebellion, 1921. I urge you all to read all these original sources. They are available on the internet. The movement ostensibly aimed against the British was not for any patriotic causes related to India, but to restore the Caliphate or the Khalifa of the Ottoman Empire, who was considered the global unifier of Muslims and their centralized political authority after Prophet Muhammad. For the record, the Turks had rejected the Khalifa decisively before the British dislodged him. But Gandhi, with Ali brothers as his mentors, was insistent that the Khalifa's power needed to be restored. So long as Ali brothers alone led the movement from 1919 onwards, it did not get much traction, even among Muslims of India, because barring the elite, Indian Muslims were totally ignorant about the politics of Turkey or the Ottoman Empire. But once M.K. Gandhi became the zealous foot soldier of Islam, cajoled and bullied Indians to join the Khilafat movement, which was also called the non-cooperation movement, the politics of the pan-Islamic Ummah took deep root in India. As I mentioned yesterday, both Pakistan and the ISIS are trying to re-establish a new caliphate in the same region. Had M.K. Gandhi been alive today, he may well have forced Hindus to go make common cause with ISIS, ISI, and military generals of Pakistan to help re-establish caliphate in Syria, as many Muslims and their collaborators in left parties of India are actually doing even today. Most Hindus were ignorant about the real motivation of Gandhi and Ali brothers. They mistook the term Khilafat to mean to oppose, because that is how the word is used in common parlance in Hindustani till today. That it was also called the movement for non cooperation against the British fooled most Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, and Bauds into believing that they were being drawn into a movement for national freedom. That's how my JNU history professors also taught about the Khilafat movement. But the Ali brothers and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad were clear that their aim was to restore Islamic power in India after overthrowing the British. If Hindus came in the way, they had to be eliminated. Gandhi had merely promised Swaraj in 1 year if Hindus made common cause with their Muslim brothers in the Khilafat agitation. But Moplahs declared that they had, in all seriousness, implemented their version of Swaraj, that is, they turned Malabar from a Dar al Harb into Dar al Islam, that is, a land where Islam rules, by carrying out systematic slaughter of innocent Hindus, brutally killing thousands, abducting, raping, maiming countless Hindu women, burning or skinning alive all those Hindus who refused to convert to Islam. They looted every Hindu home, set to fire what remained of opulent households, and butchered or took away even little children for forced conversions. As it turned out, the Moplah massacres were actually a dress rehearsal for forcing a bloody partition of India in 1947. Tragically enough, M.K. Gandhi, who projected himself as the prophet of Satya and Ahimsa, not only justified the slaughters, rapes, and abductions, but also told outright lies to cover up the atrocities, and in fact blamed Hindus for not propagating his message of Satya and Ahimsa seriously. Today's speaker, Advocate Sanku T. Das, is a native of Punani in Mallapuram. After completing his law degree in Delhi, he has been practicing law at Tirur Court since 2015. He was associated with the Save Sabrimala movement and stands up for Hindu causes in Kerala, where Hindus have increasingly become an endangered community unless they fall in line with commie dictates or the demands of the conversion mafia. The focus of his talk today will be how the leftist distortionists manufactured a fake narrative around the Hindu genocide of 1921 in Malabar and how it has changed the history of Kerala in a decisive manner. Over to you, Advocate Das.
Thank you, Madhuji. Hello all. Namaste. Madhuji has very clearly, in a nutshell, in 10 minutes, she has explained the whole, the very basic premises of this unfortunate and gruesome incident that happened in Malabar in 1921. I would just like to correct one thing, because the very purpose of this program is to correct the misconceptions that has been very carefully laid down in history. The the Moplah riot or the Moplah Lehala didn't actually last for 2 months. It actually lasted for 5 months. The Moplah Lehala in Malabar started in 1921 August 20th, and it ended in 1922 January 10th. It was only on January 5th of 1922 the leader or the mass murderer Variankunnathu Kunjamad Haji was arrested by Inspector Ramanath Iyer and Subedar Gopala Menon. Only after his arrest, by January, all the other accomplices associated with him were arrested. It was only by 1922 January 10 the riot was suppressed. So it actually lasted for 145 days, almost 5 months. This one-sided killing or communal attack was happening in Malabar, and that should actually be one among the longest or longest communal riot in the history of whole India, because we know we are discussing a riot that happened for 2 or 3 days that resulted in the killing of 1,000 people from both sides for 20 years. But this is a riot that actually lasted for 5 months, with one community one-sidedly attacking, killing, raping, looting the other community, almost 10,000 people dying. The casualties of Malabar massacre is counted as 10,000. The British sources, the official sources says at least 2,500. Count can be more. And the Hindu historians or um, um, the authentic Kerala historians round up the figure to something around 5,000. But the unofficial accounts or the victims' accounts state that the actual people, the number of people who were murdered in Malabar massacre was more than 10,000. Historians like A. Sridhar Menon, who wrote the Survey of Kerala History, then other people like Naim Qureshi, they are all counting the number to more than 10,000. So this is a riot, or this is a communal violence that lasted for 5 months, resulted in the murder of more than 10,000 people, or almost 5,000 people were forcefully converted, more than 3,000 women were raped, hundreds of temples were destroyed, thousands of houses were looted, and an Islamic state was established for a period of 5 months. An Islamic state, it is only one time in the history of India that a proper Islamic state with a that is ruled according to Sharia has been established in the history of India, and that almost lasted for 5 months. Tax was collected by the rioters. Army was employed by them, and a Moplah army exclusively including Muslim members. An army of 50,000 people with Moplah soldiers was employed. A sultan was anointed. In 1921, August 22nd, Ali Musliar, who was the Khatib of Tirurangadi Masjid, who was appointed as the ruler of Malabar, Sultan Ali Raja. He was instated as the ruler. And after Ali Raja surrendered to British in August 30th, Variangunnathu Kunyamadu Haji, the leader of the mass murders or the cruelest face in the history of India, he was appointed as the Sultan, and his rule actually lasted for 5 months. I already told you that he had made an army of 50,000 people. He was wearing the crown, which is called fez, that represents the Khalifa of Turkey. He had a flag, Al Rawat Al Lukab, the black flag of eagle, which we are familiar with because the same thing is used by ISIS today. A black flag in which La ilaha illallah or the Shahadat Kalima is written in white letters. They were having such a flag. Al Rawat Al Lukab was used by them. Then the war cry of the soldiers were Bolo Takbir Allahu Akbar. So there was a war cry, and in proper fashion, according to Sharia, the province of Malabar, that is almost 40% of southern Malabar, 5,200 square kilometers of land, that was ruled by them. Tax was collected. People were put to trial, religious trial, for insulting Islam or not converting to Islam or worshipping idols. People were put to trial, and punishments were given to them, and mass murders were committed. So this is the greatest, or this is the longest riot or a communal attack in the history of India that actually lasted for 5 months. Madhuji was saying that yesterday in his lecture, Mr. Sandeep Balakrishna had already explained the background of the riots. It was actually the culmination of more than hundreds of riots that happened in Malabar from 1800 to 1921. After the death of Tipu Sultan, Kerala, this Malabar had a history of repeated attacks from Muslim rulers. It started with Hyder Ali in 1766, the father of Tipu Sultan. He raided Malabar in 1766. Then Tipu Sultan raided Malabar twice. After 1722 Battle of Srirangam, or the Third Anglo-British War, he gave away the the rule of Malabar. Till then, it was governed by Tipu Sultan, and he had taken all the land from the Hindu landlords and given it to neo-converts to Muslims, and they were made the rulers. The actual people who were occupying that area were forced to flee from Malabar. And only after 1799, after the death of Tipu Sultan, these landlords came back, and with the help of the British company, they were able to take back the land. And this resulted in some kind of tensions in Malabar, because for a brief period of time, when Tipu Sultan was the ruler of Malabar, the Muslim neo-converts were having all the land of their own. The original landlords, the original Jemmis of that area, were forced to flee, and they gave up all their land and their property, and they went to southern parts of Kerala, that is Tiruvidampur. And after the death of Tipu Sultan, they are coming back, and with the help of the Britishers, they filed civil suits and they claimed their land back. So people who occupied land belonging to Hindus for a brief period of 5 to 10 years, they were deposed of their illegal occupation, and this led to some kind of halilakams in Malabar, which are called religious frenzies. The number of halilakams are reported by William Logan in Malabar Manual. Then a committee was appointed by British in 1852 under T.L. Strange to investigate the cause of repeated communal problems in Malabar, because from 1800 to 1900, in the brief span of 100 years, more than 50 small-scale riots happened in Malabar. In all the riots, this Moplahs, who suffered from brief frenzies called halilakams, were attacking Hindus and killing them, and most of the time killing themselves and become shuhada, or a martyr. These people who, in this frenzy, who killed Hindus and becoming martyrs, were what to say? They were respected and they were given high position. They were hailed as shuhadakal, and in their memory, annual festivals were carried on. So this kind of tensions were happening from 1800 to 1900. The problem was that these were all the reality was that these were all individualized incidents, or these were all isolated incidents. Such kind of halilakams were not conducted by Muslims in a group, or there was no proper organization, there was no coordination. It was done by individuals on their own. But what happened after 1900 was that the Congress led by Gandhi gave them a stage for them to, it gave them an opportunity to organize under this religious banner. It gave them their political support. It gave a respectable position for this religious fanaticism in politics, and it was after enjoying all these facilities, they were able to conduct a full-fledged riot and established a kingdom of their own and kill all the Hindus in such a manner. Even before 1921, even before 1900, there were a series of such kind of riots and communal violences and incidents were happening in Malabar. Actually, the history of Islamic communal issues in Malabar starts from the period of 1600, from the time of Kunyali Marakkar. Kunyali Marakkar was the naval captain of Samurin of Calicut. Kunyali Marakkar is a title. There are 4 Kunyali Marakkars in that lineage. And the 4th Kunyali Marakkar, after becoming the lord of a very big navy of the Samurin, he declared himself as the Islamic Raja, and he fought against the Samurin, and he was captured by Samurin with the help of Portuguese and was executed. This Moplahs of Malabar, they are the later generations of Arabic traders who came to Kerala in ships and who had merged with the local people of local people of Kerala. So the RC people, historians like RC Majumdar in a history and culture of Indian people, they say that these are the Moplahs of Malabar are actually Ottoman pirates or Barbary pirates, and also the offsprings of the Arabic traders. So they were accustomed with warfare in the sea. So they were able to they were having a very good command over the sea. So this ability was recognized by Samurin. The first Kunyali Marakar came as a refugee from Cochin kingdom to Kozhikode, seeking the refuge of Samurin. Samurin, after realizing his potential and their abilities in the sea, made them the naval captains. The first Kunyali Marakar was appointed as the naval captain. And for them to make an army, Samurin issued a very strange order in 1550, saying that one child from each Hindu family should be raised as a Muslim. So that was the level of reception that they got from Samurin. One Hindu child from every Hindu family was customarily or legally bound to be brought up as a Muslim. And by 1600, the number of Muslim Moplah soldiers in the Samurin navy rose to such big proportion that they actually thought that they can now take over the kingdom on their own strength. And it was then the fourth Kunyali Marakar challenged the Samurin and declared himself as the Moplah Raja or Islamic Sultan, and he fought against Samurin. Many people today in Kerala are celebrating Kunyali Marakar as a warlord and a brave patriot only on the basis that he fought against the Portuguese. Many of them are unaware that actually Kunyali Marakar was not fighting against the Portuguese. He was fighting against the Samurin. It was a Samuri who sought the help of the Portuguese to capture him. So he was captured in 1600 and 1599 or 1600, and he was executed. So this tension starts from that period. Later in 1766, as I already mentioned, Hyder Ali is attacking Malabar. Hyder Ali was attacking Malabar on the invitation of Ali Raja. There was a Muslim kingdom in Kerala called the Arakkal Rajavamsham. Arakkal Rajavamsham is an offshoot of Chirakkal Rajavamsham, which is a Hindu dynasty. One lady from Chirakkal Rajavamsham converted to Islam, marrying a Muslim trader, and they were accepted by the Chirakkal Rajavamsham, and they were given status of a Raja, and that Muslim family became Arakkal family. It is the only Muslim dynasty or ruling family in the history of Kerala. This Ali Raja invited Hyder Ali to come to Malabar and capture Malabar, and it was him who led the army of the Hyder Ali, and the most brutal or the most violent forms of atrocities were actually committed by the soldiers of Ali Raja rather than the soldiers of Hyder Ali. So it happened in that time, but it was a raid. It was not a proper capture or an establishment of a kingdom or a proper rule. It was a raid conducted by Hyder Ali. After Hyder Ali's son Tipu Sultan raided Malabar twice, and it was only after Tipu Sultan's raid a Muslim kingdom was established in Kerala. Malabar was brought under his control. He renamed the major cities of Malabar. For example, Kozhikode was under the attack of Tipu Sultan, the Islamization of Malabar actually started. So many people were forcefully converted to Islam. Temples were destroyed in large numbers. Hindus were murdered for refusing to convert to Islam. Many of them were forced to flee Malabar. They had to run away to faraway places for saving their family. So, and the new converts of Malabar became the new rulers of Malabar. So it was during Tipu Sultan's reign or Tipu's reign that the Islamization or Islamization of Malabar actually started. And after the death of Tipu Sultan, when the actual landlords came back, the tension started, the Halilakam started, that I have already explained. Then In 1920s, what happened? As already explained by Madhuji, the First World War started from 1914. It lasted till 1918. So British forces and Russia were on one side, Turkey aligned with Germany, who were on the other side. So normally, when Turkey was attacked, Turkey was ruled by Ottoman Caliphate, who is considered to be the religious and political leader of Muslim Ummah or Muslim Ummah, because he is hailing from the direct bloodline of Prophet Muhammad, and he is considered to be the what to say, the leader of the Muslim community throughout the world. The Khalifa has such a status in the Muslim religion. So when Turkey was attacked, it was considered to be an attack against the Muslim Ummah. It was considered to be an attack against the whole Muslim community. And in 1914, Turkey issued a jihad, which is called the Ottoman Jihad, asking the Muslim Ummah all over the world to raise in arms against the attacking Christian invaders, which are the British. So it was explained in a religious line rather than a political line. It was explained in such a fashion that Turkey being the capital of Muslim Caliphate and Britain being a Christian country, it is an attack by a Christian nation over a Muslim nation. And all the Muslims throughout the world were asked to take up arms and fight against the British, and it was told that it was their duty to protect the Caliphate of Turkey. So from 1914, since the Ottoman Jihad was proclaimed, such kind of awakenings happened throughout South Asia. Only in India it got such a political force, it got such a following, because only in India there was a Gandhi and there was a Congress party to support it and accept it as a part of nationalist movement. In all other countries, such kind of support, they were not getting such kind of support from the major political forces, because it was an issue of Turkey. It was not an issue of that country. But in India, on the leadership of Maulana Muhammad Ali and Maulana Shaukat Ali, who are called as the Ali brothers, a Khilafat committee was established in 1915, and this Ali brothers paraded through, or they campaigned throughout India among the Muslims, telling them the need for rising arms against the British for saving Turkey. Various kind of diplomatic attempts were made by them. For example, they went to Saudi Arabia and asked the ruler of Saudi to interfere. Saudi Arabian ruler refused. Then they asked the ruler of Afghanistan, who is Amir Amanullah, to invade India and fight the British and make them run away from India and establish an Islamic rule in India. Actually, Amir Amanullah once attacked also. He reached the northwestern frontier province, but he was not able to succeed. He had to return. Then they approached Iran. The ruler of Iran was approached. He also refused to help them, and it was then they decided to start a home movement by convincing all the Muslim brethren to rise in arms against the British rule for protecting Turkey. By 1918, the First World War ended, but by that time, the Khilafat movement in India had gained such kind of strength due to the very inflammable and inciting speeches of Ali brothers. They were able to publish a Khilafat manifesto by 1918, and almost 1 lakh copies of the Khilafat manifesto were distributed. The Khilafat manifesto demanded the British to leave Turkey. Otherwise, the anger of the Indian Muslims will go out of proportions. It was framed in such a manner. By 1918, the First World War was over. The side which Turkey aligned with lost the war. Turkey faced a very humiliating defeat by the Treaty of Lausanne in 1918 and by the Treaty of Service in 1919. Turkey was forced to give away their a major chunk of their their territory. The Khilafah or the Caliph of this Turkey was reduced into a very titular position. The position of Khalifa was abolished, and he was dethroned. To be frank, the position of Khalifa ceased to exist after the Treaty of Service, and most of the territory of Turkey at that time extended till Africa. So most of the territory of Turkey was taken away. So then the Khilafat movement in India took a violent form. It wanted the Khalifa of Turkey to be reinstated. They wanted him to be placed in the throne again, because an attack on Turkey or a dethroning of Khalifa was considered to be an attack on Islam. He being the political and spiritual leader of Islam, he being dethroned meant the dignity of Muslims throughout the globe being insulted. So such kind of a movement started in India. The Khilafat was gaining huge momentum in India. It was at that time that the Congress led by Gandhi decided that this anger against the British that is prevalent in the Indian Muslims can be used for the benefit of the nationalist movement. Because even though the aims or the targets or the demands were different, the enemy was the same. There was a common enemy, and the enemy was British. Even though the enemy, it is wrong to say that we were having a freedom movement at that time. Historians like N.G.S. Narayanan are of the opinion that it is wrong to say that Khilafat movement is part of freedom movement because it was inducted into the nationalist fold by Congress, because at that time even Congress was not conducting a freedom movement. The resolution for Purna Swaraj was only passed in 1930. Till during 1920, what Congress was demanding was only more representation in government. In 1921, the non-cooperation movement was against the Rowlatt Act. Rowlatt Act, it didn't accept the Indians' demand for more representation in the government. Also, the home rule demand was also not accepted. Only after 1930, Congress started demanding independence. Till then, it was of the opinion that the British rule is good for India. Britishers should remain in India. In 1885, Congress was started with the help of a viceroy. He was a Britisher. Alan Octavio Hume. So it was many times it is being criticized as a pressure valve for taking out the anger and the frustration of Indians against the Britishers by asking for meager concessions and minimum representations and celebrating such things as great victory. So the Congress was of the opinion that the Britishers should remain in India. They should civilize India. They should teach India the democratic methods, and only after India has ripened into a proper democratic system, or only after India has grown into such an extent, it should be given freedom. Only in 1942, Congress is demanding quit India. It was the first time that Congress had asked the Britishers to leave India. Till 1942, there was no demand for quit India. They were saying that you remain here, but give us something more. Give us some more representation. So it is wrong to say that even during 1920, the Congress was involved in freedom struggle. Congress was not involved in freedom struggle. They were involved in bargaining and negotiation for greater representation and such kind of benefits only. So it is utterly wrong to say that Khilafat is a part of freedom struggle because the Congress had supported it. Even the Congress were not doing any freedom struggle at that time. So I was saying that. There was a anger against the Britishers for after the Rowlatt Act dismissed the Congress demand for greater representation. And in 1919, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Amritsar massacre, or the Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened. So after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, as a reply or as a vengeance to that, the non-cooperation movement was declared. But the non-cooperation movement required a support from the Muslims, because a major Muslims being a major part of the population was standing out from the nationalist movement. They were not including, or they were not involving themselves against the nationalist movement. They were viewing Congress with a with a skepticism or a suspicion that Congress is not representing their interests. And it was due to this skepticism that the All India Muslim League was formed. Because after 1905, the partition of Bengal, when the Hindus and the Congress opposed the partition of Bengal, a prominent majority of the Muslim community supported the partition of Bengal. And it was for the furtherance of this, the All India Muslim League was formed. So Muslim League from the very beginning was taking a position aligning with the British, favoring the British, expecting that by taking such a stand, they will be able to gain more representation than the Hindus. They will be able to gain more favor from the British. Because after 1857 revolt, Muslims and Hindus were equally involved in the first war of independence, that is 1857 revolt. So after the suppression of 1857 revolt, the Britishers started viewing Muslims with a suspicion, and they were not given proper representation in government. They were not taken for government jobs. They were not considered for high positions. So the Muslims considered it as a blunder on their part to revolt against the Britishers, siding with the Hindus, with the Hindus not suffering such kind of a backlash, but only them being the sufferers. So it was after that the Muslims in India started a position which favored Britishers, and it was a position that they were continuously trying to attract the support or the favor of Britishers. And it is exactly why in 1860 Sayyid Ahmad Khan wrote the Loyal Mohammedans of India. So this explains the position of Muslims at that time, because they wanted to prove that they are loyal to the British, and then there is no need for such kind of a discrimination or a skepticism towards us. We are all very loyal to you. You should give us more opportunities and more positions. So this position was further till 1905. Then the Muslim League also continued that kind of politics. It became the representative of the Muslim community of India, and they started supporting the Britishers. So Gandhi and Congress wanted to bring the Muslim fold or the Muslim League into the nationalist movement. These people who were separated from the nationalist movement and remaining as a separate bloc, they should be brought into the nationalist movement. So they were looking for an opportunity, and this turned out, it appeared that this is a very good opportunity, because now the Muslims in India are all very much angered against the British for the dethroning of the Caliph of Turkey. So this anger can be utilized. This anti-British sentiment can be utilized, and they can be brought to the nationalist fold. So that was the calculation of Congress. Gandhi was not aware of the Hindu-Muslim equation of India. He was not well aware of the political structure of India, because Gandhi was not in India for a long time. He had returned to India only in 1950. Because even after the First World War, Gandhi returned to India. Even when the Khilafat movement started, Gandhi was not in India. He studied in England, and then he was working in South Africa. Only in 1915 he returned to India, and on the advice of his political mentor or guru, Sri Gopalakrishna Gokhale, Gandhi conducted a two-year period of traveling throughout India for understanding. And what did he understand? That is another question of debate. So first 1 year he was concentrated in Gujarat, and then only in 1920 Gandhi is coming to the leadership of Congress. Till 1919 Gandhi was not in the leadership of Congress, but by 1921 Gandhi gained such kind of control over the Congress that by 1923, after Chittaranjan Das was arrested, Gandhi became the dictator of Congress. There was no there was no kind of answer to Gandhi's whims and fancies. Everyone were obliged to obey Gandhi, even though they feel that that idea is foolish. So such kind of influence he gained in Congress by in the 1990-21 period. So in 1919, this blunder was committed by Congress, the brunt of which, or the result of which, was borne by the unfortunate and poor Hindus of Malabar, who are not even aware of the Khalifa or the First World War thing. So Maulana Muhammad Ali and Maulana Shaukat Ali, they were invited to Congress meeting. Congress gave them full assurance that Congress will support the Khilafat movement if they support the non-cooperation movement. So there was a pact for a joint Khilafat Swaraj movement. But there was no confusion on the part of Maulana Muhammad Ali or Maulana Shaukat Ali. They were very clear that their interest is only the protection of Khalifa. They are not at all interested in what to say, the independence of India or any other thing, because there was no demand also. The Khilafat movement at no point has raised the point that India should be given independence. The only demand raised by them was that Turkey should be given its independence. The Khalifa should be instated in his position. And imagine when the Khalifa of Turkey is dethroned, such kind of anger is happening. Many things have happened in India also. In the 1857 revolt was suppressed. Hundreds of Hindu rulers, hundreds of Indian rulers, even Muslim rulers in India were dethroned. They were what to say? They were deported also. In 1875, the British Crown officially, Queen Victoria was declared the Empress of India. In 1914 to 1918, in the First World War, hundreds of Indian soldiers were forced to join the British Army and die for a cause they were not even aware of. Against all these things, no anger was there, no anguish was there, no fight was there. But when the ruler of Turkey lost his position, such kind of a movement is happening in India. So the only intention was protecting the izzat or protecting the dignity of Islamic Ummah. So that was the first instance in which the idea of pan-Islamism was implemented in India, and it was given a respected position. Hove Sheshadri, H.V. Sheshadri or Hove Sheshadri, in his article, The Himalayan Blunder of Khilafat Movement, the Himalayan Blunder, he very clearly states that the Khilafat movement gave rise to two disastrous long-term consequences in Indian history. Two disastrous long-term consequences. First of all, it accepted Muslim fanaticism and gave it a respectable position. The idea that all the issues, even without national borders, the international issues or anything that concerned with the Islamic Ummah is a problem of Indian Muslim. That kind of pan-Islamic idea was accepted in India, and it was given a very respectable position. It was converted into a movement with the Congress party and the nationalist movement supporting it. So that was the first thing. The Muslim fanaticism was accepted and it was given a respectable position. It also helped in the organizing them or unifying the Muslims who were actually not were having such kind of a consensus on something till that time. It gave a unifying point or a single point on which they can join together and fight together, and that was the Izzat of Islam. That was the protection of Muslim Ummah. So it gave a rallying point or a unification point for the Muslims. It encouraged and accepted Muslim fanaticism and gave it a very respectable position in Indian political spectrum. That was the first thing. Second thing was that it gave away the control or the what to say, it gave away the commanding position of the Muslim community to some religious fanatics or mullahs or such kind of leaders, the ulema, the Muslim leaders or some Maulavis or mullahs. They were accepted as the de facto commanders of or de facto what to say, authorities of Muslim community, and discussions were carried with them, and their dictats were able to be passed away as the opinion of the whole Muslim community. So the leadership of Indian Muslim community was given anyway to some religious fanatic mullahs by this Khilafat movement. That was the second disastrous thing that the Khilafat movement did. And obviously, when such kind of a fanatic movement is accepted into the nationalist fold, it will obviously result in such kind of disastrous consequences. Even Gandhi or Nehru didn't deny this. The idea of Khilafat is pan-Islamism, and it has nothing to do with India, and it has nothing to do with Indian freedom struggle. Even Gandhi has accepted this, and he is asking the Indian Hindus to understand that even though this is not a problem of India, even though the Khilafat movement has nothing to do with India, it is your duty to fight for your Muslim brethren. I quote Gandhi. Gandhi, the Turkish question, written in Young India in June 29, 1921. Let Hindus not be frightened by pan-Islamism. It is not, it need not be anti-India or anti-Hindu. Musalman must wish well to every Muslim states. He must therefore cooperate with his Muslim brothers in the attempt to save the Turkish Empire from extinction. So Gandhi is asking the Hindus in India to align with his Muslim brethren to prevent the extinction of Turkish Empire. It is a question of pan-Islamism. Gandhi is saying that we have nothing to fear about pan-Islamism. Even though it is pan-Islamism, you don't have to worry about it. Then not just Gandhi, even Jawaharlal Nehru in Discovery of India, page number 318, he says the World War and the fate of Turkish Khilafat and the Muslim holy places produced a powerful impression on the Muslims of India and made them intensely anti-British. A Muslim organization grew up in close cooperation of the Congress, and that was the Khilafat Committee. So he was saying that Nehru is admitting that the Khilafat Committee is purely motivated by anti-British feelings as a result of the Turkish problem, and it has nothing to do with Indian circumstances or Indian freedom struggle. Still, we are asking you to align with them in an expectation that if you stand with them today for their for realizing their or for remedying their religious grievance, tomorrow they might stand with you for remedying your political grievance. So that was the concept followed by Gandhi and Nehru and Congress at that time. Even in Congress party, there were a number of people who were opposed to bring the Khilafat volunteers into the Congress fold or the nationalist fold. People like C.R. Das or C.F. Andrews or Annie Besant or Chittaranjan Das or even Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Even Muhammad Ali Jinnah curiously opposed the idea of Gandhi for a Khilafat Swaraj cooperation. He said that Khilafat is a religious issue and it has nothing to do with India's independence, and a Congress party, which is the mouthpiece of the nationalist movement in India, aligning with the Khilafat will only antagonize the Britishers, and it will only prove counterproductive for our long-term interests. That was the position taken by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. It was voted in the Congress AICC, but due to Gandhi's influence against 826 votes, the pro-Gandhi faction won 1,886 votes, 1886 votes, due to the what to say, the charisma of Gandhi, or due to the the power or the position of Gandhi. He was able to gather that kind of supporters in his way, and it was after this resolution that the Khilafat was accepted as a program. Gandhi became so so involved with that movement that in a lecture in an article in Young India, Gandhi is saying that if I have to postpone the Swaraj for the Khilafat cause, I will very gladly postpone the Swaraj for the Khilafat cause, because my opinion is that the Swaraj can only be attained by Khilafat. So Khilafat is prior, and Khilafat is more important, was the position of Gandhi, and he committed himself to the idea of Khilafat. From 1920 August 1, Khilafat Day was observed. Khilafat Morning Day was observed. Gandhi travelled with the Ali brothers throughout India. In 1920, August 18, Gandhi reached Kerala in Calicut. With Ali brothers, Gandhi reached Kerala in August 19. Gandhi addressed a gathering of followers in Calicut beach. And in that address, he advised, or he asked the Congress volunteers in Kerala to organize Khilafat committees. And it is very strange that it was the Hindu leaders of Kerala, Hindu Congress leaders of Kerala, who organized the first Khilafat committees. It was the Congress leaders like K.P. Keshav Menon, Madhav Nair, P. Narayana Pilla and others who started the Khilafat committees. They went to people, they collected contributions. 2,500 rupees was raised by them, and Madhavan Nair in his book The Malabar Kalabam, written after the Moplah Lehala, he says it is a matter of great regret for him that he had to carry the very same people who contributed for the Khilafat committee in last year to the relief camps after the Moplah Lehala was over. The very same people who contributed to the Khilafat committee were taken to refugee camp by the very same people, very same Congress leaders. And even this Madhavan Nair himself was forced to convert to Islam. He has also written about that in his Malabar Kalabam book. He says that the Moplahs of Erana decided that from tomorrow onwards there should not be two religions, there should be only one religion, and that religion is Islam. And all the Hindus were asked to convert to Islam from the very next day itself, and he was also listed among the people to be converted. He fled from them. He has written about it. So these people were the ones who started the Khilafat committees first, but very soon the nature of the Khilafat committees changed. The leadership of the Khilafat from these Congress leaders very soon shifted to the hands of the fanatic religious Muslims. People like Ali Musliar took over the command of Khilafat. He organized the Khilafat volunteer camps. He enrolled Muslim youth into Khilafat. He started Khilafat rallies with more than 300 to 400 Khilafat volunteers. Rallies carrying weapons were conducted, and the nature of the Khilafat very soon, because already Malabar was having this kind of communal tensions. The fuel was already there. All they wanted was a spark, and Congress provided them the spark. It organized them the very good stage. It brought together all the volunteers from various parts. It gave them a very respectable position also, and the stage was all set. Now all they wanted to do is that carry out their real agenda. The spark was a regional skirmish that happened between the titular king of Nilambur, the titular ruler of Nilambur, who is called the Tirumulpad. The Tirumulpad Kovilagam was attacked by his manager, one Mr. Muhammad, and his pistol was stolen. The Tirumulpade was asked by the Muhammad the day before to contribute 350 rupees and 2 sacks of rice to Khilafat committee. Tirumulpade didn't accept. After that, the Kovilagam was looted by the manager and his team, a 15-member team, and many things were stolen, including the Tirumulpad's pistol. Tirumulpad complained to the police, and the police, the inspector of police, Mr. Narayana Menon, when he asked the Muhammad to appear for questioning, he came with a band of 100 Khilafat volunteers, and he threatened the inspector that if he is aligning with this Tirumulpade, he will have to face grave consequences. The inspector was so worried that he had to convince them that he had only asked them to come there to understand the reality, and there was no legal action will be taken against him, and they were asked to return peacefully. On the very same day, the inspector wrote a letter to the collector, C.F. Thomas, collector Mr. Thomas. In the letter, he is stating that letter is available. In this letter, he is stating that more than 3,000 people had surrounded the Kovilagam of Tirumulpad. They are all having weapons, and even women, even aged Muslim ladies were part of that mass, and they carrying rosaries and other religious symbols in their hands. They were encouraging the others to commit violence. So inspector reported that the condition is in Malabar has become very tense. These people have been organized on religious lines. They are all having weapons. Any day a revolt can or a riot can happen. So on the report of Mr. Narayana Menon, collector along with the battalion of army, they came to Malabar. They conducted raids on some Muslim mosques. Khilafat committees were raided. Khilafat literature was seized. weapons were seized, but nobody was, this Muhammad was not traceable. He was not able to arrest. But this news was very purposefully circulated in the Muslim areas in a wrong way. The fake news said that the Mallapuram Masjid has been attacked by collector and the army, and the Mallapuram Masjid has been destroyed. That was the news that got spread, and Muslims who were waiting for a reason to start the riot took this as an opportunity. And from the next day, this happened in August 19, and from August 20th, a full-fledged riot started in Malabar. People started assembling in Tirurangadi. The court and the registry were attacked. Another group of people ranging from 500 to 1,000, they marched to Nilambur for killing Tirumulpadu. Tirumulpadu had fled. He had left the Kovilagam with his family, but all the other guards and other people who were protecting the Kovilagam, almost 50 of them were killed. Tirur court was attacked, registry was attacked, and all the documents were burned down. Railway station was attacked, railway lines were destroyed, and the telephone cables and telegram cables, they were all destroyed. Britishers very few in number. They were not having the strength to deal with such a kind of big mob. Almost 3,000, 5,000 people were there. They were not able to control them. In that fight, 2 British officers were killed, and the Britishers had to flee. They had to go out of Nilambur. So from the next day, there was no Britishers in India. News was circulated that all the Britishers have left Malabar. The collector Thomas and superintendent, district police superintendent Mr. Hitchcock, has been murdered by the rioters. Now there is no one to question us. The Khilafat has been established. The whole area is now under our control. On August 22nd, Ali Musliar is instated as the Sultan Ali Raja of Malabar. This 5,200 square kilometer area of land, 40% of southern Malabar, now become a kingdom ruled by Sultan Ali Raja. The very next day, the Khatib of Tirurangadi Masjid is appointed as the Sultan of Malabar. And then a series of communal attacks, plundering, rapes, loot, destruction of temples, forceful conversions, all started. From August 22nd, the full-fledged riot broke down started in Malabar. I am sure that yesterday Mr. Sandeep Balakrishna had explained from Madhuji's introductory session. I understood that he had read the letter of Nilambur Rani, and he has read quotes from Annie Besant, and he has read from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So the actual things that happened in Malabar is very much known to you. I will just read one paragraph from meeting convened by Samurin of Calicut. A meeting was convened by Samurin of Calicut in 1921, and they passed some resolutions against these attacks. The 6th resolution explains in a nutshell the things that happened in Malabar in those days. I quote, that the conference views with indignation and sorrow the attempts made at various quarters by interested parties to ignore or minimize the crimes committed by the rebels, such as brutally dishonoring women, flaying people alive, wholesale slaughter of men, women, and children, burning alive entire families, forcibly converting people in thousands, and slaying those who refuse to get converted, throwing half-dead people into wells and leaving the victims to struggle for escape till finally released from their suffering by death, burning a great many and looting practically all Hindu and Christian houses in the disturbed areas, in which even Moplah women and children took. So these are all the things happened. Even Moplah women and children took part and robbed women of even the garments on their bodies. In short, reducing the whole non-Muslim population to abject destitution, cruelly insulting the religious sentiments of the Hindus by desecrating and destroying numerous temples in the disturbed areas, killing cows within the temple precincts, putting their entrails on the holy image, and hanging skulls on the walls of the roofs. So these 11 things are listed by the in the meeting, in the resolution passed in the meeting convened by Samurin of Calicut. These are only a brief description of what all things happened. This I quote another paragraph from the letter of Nilambur Rani to Lady Reading, who was the wife of Lord Reading. The women of Malabar, in the leadership of Lady of Nilambur, wrote a letter. But it is possible that your ladyship is not fully apprised of all the horrors and atrocities perpetrated by the fiendish rebels, of the many wells and tanks filled up with the mutilated, but often only half-dead bodies of our nearest and dearest ones who refused to abandon the faith of our fathers, of pregnant women cut to pieces and left on the roadsides and the jungles, with the unborn babe protruding from the mangled corpse, of our innocent and helpless children torn from our arms and done to death before our eyes, and our husbands and fathers tortured, flayed and burnt alive, of our hapless sisters forcibly carried away from the midst of kith and kin and subjected to very shame and outrage which the vile and brutal imagination of the inhuman hellhounds could conceive of thousands of our homesteads reduced to cinder mounds out of sheer savagery and a wanton spirit of destruction, of our place of worship desecrated and destroyed, and of the images of deity shamefully insulted by putting the entrails of slaughtered cows where flower garlands used to lie, or else smashed to pieces of the wholesome looting of hard-earned wealth of generations, reducing many who were formerly rich and prosperous to publicly beg for a piece of two in the streets, Calicut, to buy salt or chili or betel leaf, rice being mercifully provided by the various relief agencies. In the Devadar Committee report that was appointed after the massacre, the Devadar Committee states that more than 25,000 people are living in the relief camp organized in Kozhikode only. There were other relief camps also. The Samurin Raja of Calicut opened his palace for the refugees. Many Hindu families opened their households for the people who lost everything in the riots. So Annie Besant in her article in New India, she states that more than 1 lakh people become refugees. Annie Besant's letter also, I am sure Mr. Sandeep Balakrishna has read yesterday. I will just quote a brief paragraph from that. Mr. Gandhi, can he not feel a little sympathy for thousands of women left with only rags driven from home, for little children born of flying mothers on roads in refugee camps? The misery is beyond description. I'll tell one incident in which we are all aware that during the 2002 riot, there was a story of a fetus taken out from a mother's womb, which was propagated by Tista Sitalwad and others, which was proved to be a false or a fake atrocity. That was proved beyond doubt that such a thing didn't happen during that riot. But actually, something like that happened in India, and that was during the Malabar riot in 1921. I quote from Annie Besant's letter. A pregnant woman carrying 7 months was cut through the abdomen by a rebel, and she was seen lying dead on the way with the dead child projecting out of her womb. A baby of 6 months was snatched away from the breast of his own mother and cut into 2 pieces. Are these rebels human beings or monsters? Annie Besant. A respectable Nair lady at Mallapuram was stripped naked by the rebels in the presence of her husband and brothers, who were made to stand close by with their hands tied behind. When they shut their eyes in abhorrence, they were compelled at the point of sword to open their eyes and witness the rape committed by the brute in their presence. So these are all the incidents that happened. There is a well in Tuvur. In the Tuvur well, the people who were subjected to religious trial and who are found to be committing some kind of actions against the religion, or who are refused to convert, they were put to a trial and they were executed. 40 people were executed and were pushed into a well in Tuvur. Swami Shraddhanand of Arya Samaj personally went to that place, and he says that he counted 40 skulls in that Tuvur well. There are a number of wells throughout Malabar, not just in Tuvur, in Nagalasheri, in Kozhikode. There are number of such kind of wells where people were executed and were thrown into. So these are all the incidents that happened. This continued for 5 months. This didn't happen for 1 day or 2 day or a month or two. This was the situation in Malabar that happened for 5 months. It was by 1921 December that the Britishers returned with full force. A special force was formed, only inducting Hindu men from Malabar, and that force is still part of Kerala Police. That is called Malabar Special Police. This force was created by appointing only Hindu men, and they were given training by British army officers. And this Malabar Special Police and the Gurkha Regiment was charged with the suppression of the was the this Malabar riot, and that started in 1921 December and ended by 1922 January 10th. So till that period, these atrocities, unexplainable atrocities, gruesome atrocities, any person who has a heart cannot listen to them without shedding a tear. So these things happened in Malabar. And how did this affect the freedom struggle? The Congress, the people actually who had listened to Gandhi and who had supported the Khilafat, who were Hindus of Malabar, they completely lost their faith in Congress and the nationalist movement, and they abandoned the nationalist movement. Sri K. Kelappan and Sri P. Narayanapilla in their article says that after 1922, it became difficult for the volunteers of Congress to go into the villages. They were unable to face people. P. Narayanapilla says that even Gandhi said that now I have become a worthless piece of fig, that nobody will listen to me anymore. Nobody will pay respect to me because this kind of thing has happened after listening to my advice. Now they will only consider me as a betrayer. The Gandhi told him that is being written by him. So the Congress and the nationalist movement lost all its credentials, all its credibility after this Malabar riots. That was actually a very big blow to the whole nationalist movement that has gained strength in at least 20 or 15 years. The whole effort that was put together by Sri Balagangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandrapal, all these efforts went into vain. And it is very curious to observe that it was after 1921 that two different streams of political ideology started in India. Because you know that in 1922, after this Chauri Chaura incidents, the non-cooperation movement was withdrawn because Gandhi was not able to carry forward this movement, and citing a very frivolous reason. The non-cooperation movement was declared after hundreds of people were shot down by General Dyer in Jallianwala Bagh. Hundreds of people, and on the justification that 20 policemen were burned in a police station in Chauri Chaura, the whole movement was withdrawn. When 10,000 Hindus were murdered in Malabar by the Khilafat or the Moplahs who were aligned with the Khilafat movement, Gandhi didn't think it was fit to withdraw this movement because the ahimsa nature of the movement has blown. There was no problem for him. But when in Chauri Chaura, when a police station was attacked and 22 people were murdered, saying that the ahimsa nature of the non-cooperation movement has gone, the whole movement was withdrawn because the Congress had reached such a stage by 1922, they were unable to carry on a public program. It was only in 1930 that Gandhi comes into the National Front again. He was only able to organize a public movement only after 8 years. That is a civil disobedience movement of 1930. Salt Satyagraha and all that is happening in 1930. From 1921 to 1930, if you observe, Gandhi had lost all the respect, and Gandhi had lost all the credibility, and he was not listened to by anyone. Even Jawaharlal Nehru at that time during 1929, he was opposed to Gandhi, and Gandhi had lost all his followers and his charm in the Congress also. So the whole nationalist movement faced a setback by this 1921 Malabar massacre. Also, the communal riots followed in various other parts of India. This Malabar riot only started as a model, or only as the first incident. This model was taken up by people, and it was by Muslims throughout India, and such kind of communal incidents happened throughout India after 1921, in Punjab, in Bengal, in Hyderabad, in Punjab, Amritsar, Lahore, Panipat, Multan. Communal riots happened. These were not communal riots, these were actually one-sided attacks. Then in UP, in Muradabad, in Meerut, in Allahabad, in Saharanpur, communal riots happened in 1923. The Bhai Paramanand was charged with investigating the reasons for the Saharanpur riot. And Bhai Paramanand says that nobody can deny the role of Khilafat leaders in instigating this riot. He's saying that in Bihar, in Bhagalpur, 1923 communal riots started. In Hyderabad, in Gulbarga, in 1923 communal started. The biggest riot that happened in Kohat, that started in September 9, 1924. Patabi Siddharamaiah, who is the official Congress historian, who wrote the history of Congress, he says that no one can go through the details of the Kohat riot without experiencing a shiver of terror going through their spine. He says that the Kohat riot broke the spine of Indian national movement, because only 5% Hindus living in a Muslim-dominated area were murdered. 150 people were killed in a single day. All of them were forced to convert, and these Hindus had to run 320 kilometers. This Kohat is now in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is a part of Pakistan. The nearest city was 320 kilometers away, Rawalpindi, and the Hindus were forced to flee to Rawalpindi. And Bhai Paramanand, Shraddhanand and Gandhi, not Bhai Paramanand, Swami Shraddhanand and Gandhi and Ali brothers, they visited Rawalpindi to talk to these victims. So this kind of things happened. It was after meeting the victims of Kohat riot, Gandhi started observing 21-day fasting, because Gandhi said that I cannot I cannot run away from taking the moral responsibility of this. The people who were living as brothers 2 years before has come to this stage only because of the position taken by me. And when he was asked by Mahadev Desai, for punishing whom are you taking this 21-day penance? Gandhi said, I am punishing myself for the folly I have committed. So such kind of, it became very clear, the genie of Muslim terrorism or Muslim radicalism has come out of the lamp, and it was unable to make it go back into that lamp. That was the result of 1921. It actually gave a model. Actually, the 1921 Malabar Rebellion was the first time the model of two-nation theory was introduced. That Hindus and Muslims are two different nations. They cannot coexist. During the 1919 Amritsar session, Maulana Muhammad Ali says there are only two options before Indian Muslims. Either you take up jihad or you do hijrat. You cannot live peacefully in India. Either you do hijrat, you go to some Darul Islam where there is an Islamic law, or you do jihad. You fight and die in the purpose of Islam, so that you will get heaven. Otherwise, there is no other option. It was Maulana Ahmad Bari. Ahmad Bari was the man who led the Indian Hijrat movement. And Patabi Siddharamaiah writes, more than 18,000 Indian Muslims observed Hijrat. They migrated to Afghanistan, selling away their property for meager prices, giving away everything. By collecting whatever they got, they migrated to Afghan, where Afghan government closed the border. These Hijra people were looted and they were forced to come back. Thousands of them died in the traveling. Horrendous incidents happened. So there was one option was Hijra. In 1918 they tried that Hijra. It proved to be unsuccessful. It was not a successful model. Then the only option was jihad, and that happened in 1921, because Khilafat had lost its importance even by 1990s, because the people of Turkey itself rejected the notion of Khilafat. From 1990 to 1923, the Turkish War of Independence happened. After the First World War, for dethroning or throwing away the Khalifa and establishing a republic, a presidential republic, a Turkish War of Independence was fought. And in 1923, the Turkish War of Independence was won. And Muhammad Kemal Ataturk was called the Kemal Pasha, who himself named the Ataturk. He became the president of Turkey, and he made Turkey a secular republic, presidential republic, and he himself abolished the position of Khalifa. So the Turkish people themselves by 1922 had by 1921 had given away the idea of Khilafat. It has having no relevance. So the actual thing that happened in Malabar was that the idea of Khilafat was dropped. There was nothing to fight against the Britishers for, and they were a formidable enemy. They were not able to fight them, so they converted or they diverted their attention to the poor, helpless Hindus who were unarmed. So anyway, we are going to die, so we'll kill many more Hindus, and we can attain heaven. Mr. K. Kelapan in his article says that the only intention before he was a Khilafat volunteer. He was an organizer of the Khilafat committee. Mr. K. Kelapan is called Kerala Gandhi. He was called Kerala Gandhi, and he led all the Gandhian, including Sarvodaya movement, Bhudan movement. All of them were led by K. Kelapan. He himself says that the only attraction for a Muslim to participate in this Moplah rebellion or the Moplah massacre, Malabar massacre, was the intention for killing kafir to gain heaven. So this thing happened in Malabar. This gave a model that Hindus and Muslims are two different nations. If Muslims fight against Hindus, they can establish their own kingdom. Islamic State is a must for a Muslim. They can only live under the Sharia. This idea was actualized for the first time in 1921. You should remember, it is only in 1933 that Muhammad Iqbal raised the two-nation theory. Only in 1933. Only in 1940, in the Lahore session of Muslim League, is the Muhammad Ali Jinnah is giving the presidential address saying we want separate state. Only in 1945, Muslim League started a direct action for realizing the two-state or realizing the idea of Pakistan. But that idea was started way back in 1921. A successful model was there. The very same model in which the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, is established. In the very same manner, an Islamic Caliphate was established in India. A Muslim ruler was appointed. Sharia law was implemented, and a Muslim army was formed. Proper Islamic State was established. And what is Moplah Lehala? Moplah Lehala was an attempt by these people to convert this Darul Kufr or Darul Harab into a Darul Islam. After establishing this Muslim kingdom, they wanted to eliminate all of this. That is why in Ernaடு, the Moplahs decided that there should not be two religions, there should be only one religion, and that is why thousands of people were massacred. So this was a clear case of a jihad, an Islamic jihad, in which religious fanatic Muslims were given political support by Congress and Gandhi for organizing into a powerful mass and conduct all kinds of atrocities against the Hindus for establishing an Islamic rule. And so far, this Malabar massacre is the only instance which inside till 1947, and a successful model of an Islamic state was established inside India. 1947, Hode Sheshadri, in his story, in his article, The Pain of Separation, which was praised by even Ramsarup Goyal and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, says that even though there was various countries inside India, the idea of nation one nation was there till 1947, and that was a spiritual strength. That idea was corrupted in 1947 when, in religious lines, it was cut down and a separate country was formed. That model was for the first time established in 1921, and that thing is being what to say that is being explained as a part of freedom struggle or a agrarian revolt against feudal landlords. It was the communist historians. After I will conclude after I finish that point, but last point, because it was only after 25 years of Malabar massacre that the narrative of agrarian revolt against feudal landlords came. Malabar riot happened in 1921. The first time a communist party explained or called it an agrarian revolt was in 1946, when EMS Namboodiripadu wrote an article called Ahwanavum Takidum. It was in the same year the first leader of opposition in parliament, communist leader Mr. A.K. Gopalan, made an address calling the people to conduct a direct action in the same line of Malabar massacre, 1921. It was after the First World War, because the Communist Party supported the Britishers during the First World War, because Soviet Union and British were having an alliance at that time. So, following their Soviet masters, Communist Party supported Britishers during the Second World War. As a price for that, the ban on Communist Party was withdrawn after the in 1942. So the Communist Party lost their local base, the public support, after they supported the Britishers and aligned with the Britishers and backstabbed the Quit India movement. So in order to regain the public support, they had to commit such kind of things, and only after that regional agitations were taken up by Communist Party, because they were aware that the freedom is there at the doorstep. In 1 or 2 years India will be independent, and when Indian independence is achieved, when we do some kind of agitations and mass struggles at this time, we can claim the credit for freeing India. And it was at that time Communist Party took up this kind of narratives, saying that it was a brave struggle against Britishers. We should repeat this model for throwing out the British emperors. So it was only in 1946 Communist Party took this position, but that was taken up by the leftist historians, including K.N. Panikkar and Romila Thapar and people like that. And it is now hailed in Kerala as a great part of Indian freedom movement. Even movies are made about the mass murderers like Variagunathu Kunyamadu Haji. The people who were killed, who were massacred, who were raped, who were put to such kind of agony are explained as British supporters or betrayers of the freedom movement, and the mass murderers, these religious fanatics, are called the brave sons of India who fought for the freedom of India against Britishers. Movies are made in their name. So it is high time, even in this 100th anniversary of this gruesome riot, the real history or the real reasons of this riot should be brought out. The real intention behind conducting such a riot should be brought out, and it should be established before the public conscience that the Malabar riot had nothing to do with independence of India. It had nothing to do with feudal against agrarian revolt against feudal landlords. It was a communal riot motivated by pure religious hate, and it has no other relevance in history other than a cruel, gruesome communal riot. That is my opinion. I think I have taken enough time, and I think I have explained my points. If there is anything, you can ask me. Thank you.
Hello, am I
Hello?
audible now?
Yes.
Uh, thank you very much, Sanku Das. It's a very impassioned and a very moving, heartrending presentation. And it's rare that we hear voices from Kerala. I promise you, we will carry a series on Kerala because even what's happening today is not coming out. I'm sure people are writing about it in Malayalam, maybe, but the English press doesn't really give us much information, nor does TV. So, do help us bring more facts out.
Sure.
How the legacy of Moplah massacres continues today and the demographic changes that have taken place today, Hindus have turned out to be are turning out to be an endangered minority. The kind of violence that's happening if you don't join the Communist Party or you don't join the dictates of the conversion mafia, you really are an endangered person. So we will certainly try to bring more voices, and I hope you will assist me in bringing many more people who are as articulate, as well informed as you are. Now, I want to ask you before we start the Q&A session. I have three quick points. One, have you written about this or not yet?
I have written, but all my articles are in Malayalam. I have not written in
Okay,
English.
in which case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this presentation of yours transcribed, and I will send you the entire document as long as it is. You
Sure, sure.
please edit it, and we would like to publish it in full.
Sure.
If it's too long, we may divide it into two parts. And I'm sure all those who've heard you today will agree that this needs to be published in English as well as in Hindi. So we will try to also get a Hindi translation of it so that these facts get to be better known. I just heard, I got information that a book on Moplahs massacre has recently been released in Kerala. I got the name of the author. I'm going to see if I can get him also, if he has still more information to give. But certainly, this lecture of yours, this presentation of yours, will be published. And please make sure that you do the filling of the gaps or adding any material you want. We'll publish them both in English. Secondly, a brief point. You've repeatedly in between referred to them as riots. Riots took place, this took place. As
Yes.
someone who has personally investigated several so called riots from 1980s onwards, I understood that this word riot is a misnomer, especially, for example, in 1984, when what was by the media at that time called Hindu Sikh riots, when Manushi did its own investigation, we found that not a single Hindu had killed a single Sikh. But the killings were not by Hindus of Sikhs, but by Congress goons of Sikhs. It's mobilized Congress goons, paid mobs who went, looted, and did many of these horrible things in 1984. That is why the report I published in Manushi,
Can I
while
make
the
one point?
just let
Can I
me
make?
finish. Yes,
Yes.
1 second. So at that time, the newspapers were calling it Hindu Sikh riots. Mine was the first report which called it Massacre of the Sikhs. Gangster rule, Massacre of the Sikhs. Because if it's one way killing, then you cannot call it a riot. And in all these riots that you so called riots you talked about, including the Moplah massacres, I don't think one can come across even one case of a Muslim being murdered in retaliation or killed. At least I haven't heard about it. If you have, let me know. But even it wasn't even retaliatory violence in self-defense. What has happened to Hindus is that we're not even today capable of self violence and self defense to protect the women of our family, to protect our kids. Even that power has been taken away from us because first the Islamic rulers, then the British demilitarized, they de-weaponized Hindus, and so the tradition of every village, every township organizing its own security gave way to the police, the so-called state police, which we know how very partisan, how easily purchasable the loyalty of the police, etc. is. Anyway, that's a small point. Finally, I'd like to tell all those, especially Silsile Kajol and another person, C.P. Ramakrishnan, who narrated a story about his grandmother telling him, giving him information or during his childhood about what happened during Khilafat. Silsile, I invite you to write for Manushi. You've been presenting very important, very insightful information. Sarojini Naidu's role, the speeches that you've just quoted, please put it down in the form of writing. And all those of you who have more information to give, I have already posted my email address in the comment section. We would welcome more information coming to us that we can publish in the form of articles. With this, I invite Dr. Ajay Shrangu, who's the founder, chairperson of Panun Kashmir. He's from Jammu. He has been a victim of ethnic cleansing in Kashmir. So he can obviously relate to what you're saying very well. Dr. Shrangu, before we open the session for Q&A, please, your comments. Can't hear. Can't hear.
Namaskar. I hope you hear me. Is it okay now? Can you hear me? Okay. I have a brief comment. It was a wonderful presentation. And even though sorrowful, deeply sorrowful, soul-wrenching, there is one aspect which is making me happy is that we are now standing up to and trying to see and go into the depth of the violence which our society over the years, over the millennia has suffered. This is something which we were avoiding, and that way I think it generates hope, because unless and until we really face squarely the crisis which we have been facing for a long time, a life-threatening crisis, an existential crisis, a genocidal crisis, we are not going to develop responses to come out of it. So that way, I feel a little relieved that yes, such things are happening, and in case of the Moplah, this what you call as genocide, a massacre, whatever you would like to call it, this is happening, and that way I feel a little relieved. I have to just add, because the discussions are going to come up in next few days, I have to add a few more dimensions to it. Not that they have not been mentioned, but they have been mentioned in passing. See, the last quarter of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had become weak. Its influence, its sway had almost decreased. Its territories were being nibbled, and a moment within the Ottoman Empire had started trying to tell the caliph to assert its authority. And it was at that point of time a group known as Young Turks was formed, in which Anwar Pasha, Talat, and basically the mentor of that thinking was, who is considered to be the progenitor of the present day pan-Islamism, is Jamal al-Din al-Afghani. Now, who had become almost a mentor to the caliph at that point of time. It was the last quarter of the 19th century. And I can just tell you that on July 30, 1914, the king of Germany, Wilhelm II, he makes a comment, and he says, "We must publicly tear off the mask of England's Christian peacefulness. Our councils in Turkey and India, our agents and so forth must inflame the entire Muslim world and move them to rise in fierce insurgency against this hated, lying nation of grossly devoid of any conscience. For if we are to build England, should at least lose India." The international frame for creating trouble, a trouble which directly would influence us, was already created. In Ottoman, the mobilization of pan-Islamism globally to strengthen the Ottoman Empire, to ultimately bring it to the position where at least the further erosion of its authority will not take place, had already started with young Turks and many committees, many organizations formed within the Turkey itself. And they trying to engage with the international forces to create an alliance in which they would then see that the Islam emerges as the dominant force in the world once again. So one thing which was developing during this period was what was subsequently known as the Jihad made in Germany. And a general like Oppenheim, he was one of the originators of this thinking. Baron Max von Oppenheim. Baron Max von Oppenheim was one of the first strategic thinkers who was visualizing mobilizing of pan-Islamism for the German imperialist interests. Around the same time when it was happening, around the same time, the communists or the socialists were thinking of mobilizing the pan-Islamism to ultimately serve their ends. And I can just quote here that Second World Congress of Communist International was held in July 1920. Just around the time the trouble was already brewing up, or it was building, say, in the Moplah. And one of the leading personalities who introduced the concept of mobilizing Indian Muslims was Aman Roy. He was the Indian communist. And I can just read the type of love he had for Islam. And we can visualize to what extent, what type of trouble we were to face in the coming years, and which we are facing even now. He said Muhammad assumed the role of the singular prophet, spreading his message of peace. Every prophet established his pretension by the performance of miracles. On that token, Muhammad must be recognized as by far the greatest of all prophets, before or after him. The expansion of Islam is the most miraculous of all miracles. The phenomenal success of Islam was primarily due to its revolutionary significance and its ability to lead the masses out of the hopeless situation created by the decay of the antique civilization. A tremendous dynamic historical phenomenon. The miraculous performance of the army of God usually dazzles the vision. The nobility of character, purity of purpose, and the piety of spirit. Their devoutness might have been fortified by superstitions, but was not stained by hypocrisy. Their fanaticism was softened by generosity and sound common sense. Their ambition was remarkably free, and selfishness, godliness for them was not a wheel for greediness. This is how Aman Roy, one of the pioneers of left movement in India, visualized the rise of Islam. And he was the person who was incorporated by Lenin into his main team to handle the affairs of Middle East and Asia. He was the person who was guiding the Communist International to mobilize ultimately the pan-Islamism, the Muslims. How could they not recognize the Moplah Hindus as landlords. They had to. They had to demonize them. They had to ultimately taboo them to justify the violence which was unleashed against them. The way that they tabooed, that they demonized us, Kashmiri Hindus, as the landlords of Kashmir, when 98% of the landlords of Kashmir were Muslims. So, Bolshevik jihad and German jihad, a jihad made in Germany, and the jihad original, three convergences were happening around the same period of time. Three convergences. They say that the jihad learned from Bolshevism the lexicon. Jihad learned from the formulations like anti-imperialism, colonialism, and they used them, and they are still using them. Germans also tried to strengthen them because they thought, and for a long period, Nazis and the communists were cohorts. Germans tried to utilize. In fact, they helped Lenin to emerge. They wanted to knock off the Tsar. They wanted to knock off the Russian Empire, and they wanted to do it for this. So once we see it from this perspective, we come to a different situation. We come to a situation that this what happened in Moplah was a continuity, the part of a very bigger game, international game. I told you about Gandhi. Gandhi should be analyzed even now by the psychoanalysts. They should do a study of his personality because there were many sick traits in his whole personality. I think a worse form of sadism as well as masochism can be seen in his entire approach. But having said that, he tried to play clever by trying to introduce Islamic imperialism and indirectly the left as well as the German imperialism as a counter to the British imperialism, without knowing what actually jihad was, without knowing what actually pan-Islamism was, without knowing actually what submission to a caliphate means. I just want to have a word of caution before I close my submission, is that yes, it's a game. We have to be very clear. And I request all of you that the best term to describe these things is genocide, because it's an internationally accepted term. It's a term which is being not only accepted, which is being understood globally. We cannot, because if we misname what is happening to Hindus, we will not be able to fight it at a very international level. We are facing a 1,000-year-old genocide. It's a declared destruction of a civilization. There are no two doubts about it. There is a doctrinal evidence of it. There is a historical evidence of it. It is a continuous thing which is going on. If we close our eyes to it, and we have to be very cautious that, yes, normally, in the normal parlance, we know right is a bad thing. But right is something which happens on both sides. Having said that, I want to just conclude by again trying to just emphasize that if we do not try to understand jihad and internalize it, it's a relentless, sustained war against all the non-Muslims of the world, all the non-Muslim civilizations of the world, even against those Muslims who disagree with the dominant creed of Muslims at that point of time, which has the power. It's a relentless war. It is a ceaseless war. We cannot close, and it's an irrational war. It's not because of uneducation it happens. It's not because of illiteracy it happens. It is not because of poverty it happens. It happens because of it's a concept of dominating the world. It's a totalitarian war, far more ruthless than the Nazi totalitarianism. And the moment we see it from this angle, then we will be able to mobilize ourselves in the coming days to face it and to defeat it.
Thank you, Ajayji. A couple of points, Sanku, again with you. You also talked about this whole feudal landlords and because they were replaced. I think this vocabulary, just as Dr. Trungu is right in saying that the right word is genocide, not riots, not disturbances, not this, not that. Similarly, India pre-British had no history of landlordism. Let's be very clear. It was a land of peasant proprietors. No king claimed to own land. The Hindu kings pre-British were entitled only to a small portion of revenue. And we had this notion, सब भूमि गोपाल की, राजा की नहीं होती थी, राजा की नहीं होती थी. And in a land where land-man ratio was in favor of human beings, which reversed during colonial rule, if you didn't like the ruler, you just moved out and set base elsewhere. So there was no shortage of land, and we didn't have landlordism. Similarly, landless poor labor. This is direct outcome of British rule, very well established by historians, especially the pioneering work done by Sri Dharampalji. I urge you to read it. The origins of bonded labor and slavery during colonial rule from their own documents, what they did here to turn huge armies of peasant proprietors into landless poor because the revenue was so extortionist that a lot of landowners who couldn't pay the revenue, therefore they lost the land. That's how landless poor came about. Now, coming to another point, they gave this two-nation theory, Jinnah and others, and they actually implemented it. I'm coming to the conclusion, totally contrary to what Mohan Bhagwat said about we having the same DNA. I think Islam changes the DNA. Christianity changes the DNA of people because our DNA is a lot determined by sanskars. And the sanskars are violence, all those things which our dharmic civilization considers unforgivable actions. इतने पाप अधर्म वो सब को incentivize करते हैं. Loot and plunder, rape and abduction of women is incentivized. Torturing people to death is incentivized. You're promised not only rewards in this world but also up there. पूरे मिलेंगे. तो DNA संस्कार से बनता है. DNA is not just what you inherit. Which is why, for example, people who do yoga, adhyatma, do meditation, it's been found that your entire DNA structure starts evolving in a different direction. It's not that it remains the same. So if my great-grandfather had X DNA, it remains unchanged altogether. Now, coming to some comments that people have posted, I need to read out because all of them can't speak on, can't come on screen. KSR Menon, I'm glad some people from Kerala are there. Mr. Menon writes, imagine these rioters were given pension as freedom fighters. Those of you who know about this, please send me a detailed note. I'd like to publish it. Some others have also, and yes, I'm sure you would know Sanku. Then there is Mr. C.P. Ramakrishnan, who says, Shruti, will you please run it on the screen? He says, I do remember the story narrated by my maternal grandfather, late N.K. Govindan Nambiar, a freedom fighter himself, and who was decorated with Tamrapatra in August 1972 for participating in the Quit India movement and undergoing 2 years plus rigorous imprisonment in Kannur Central Jail during 1942 to 45. The successive state governments not only declared the participants of Moplah Rebellion, call it rebellion, it was Moplah genocide by Moplahs, who massacred innocent Hindus, including women and children, but who also fought for creation of Pakistan, were treated as freedom fighters and given pensions. I think this needs to be brought out, documented, and published. And whoever can send me an article on this, I'll gladly publish. Now I'm going to read out something very moving and important by Professor Daksh Loya, who I thought would join us and be able to read it out himself. But since he has not managed to get the link which gives him back-end access, I'm going to read out this on behalf of Professor Daksh Loya. He's a physicist, a professor of physics. He says, yesterday Sandeep Balakrishnan recalled that in his statement in the Ahmedabad Adhiveshan of the Congress, Gandhiji stated that had the British listened to Hasrat Mohani, the Moplah incident would not have occurred. This same Mohani was given the status of a freedom fighter, and a stamp was issued in his memory in 2014. It would be interesting to see what Hasrat Mohani had to advise the British. And he stated this in his famous speech just after the Moplah massacre. He said, and Daksh is quoting Hasrat Mohani, they can no doubt contend that while they are fighting a defensive war for the sake of their religion and have left their homes, property, and belongings and taken refuge in hills and jungles, it is unfair. Now, this is horrendous. Mohani says it is unfair to characterize as plunder their commandeering of money, provisions, and other necessaries for their troops. And he goes on to add, in this connection, I should like to say just one word. The glories of Ghazi Mustafa Kemal Pasha and the conclusion of the recent Franco-Turkish treaty might create an idea in some people's minds that the evacuation of Smyrna by the Greeks is certain and the restoration of Thrace to the Turks, if not certain, is within the bounds of possibility. Consequently, they might entertain the hope that the struggle in the Near East is coming to a close. I want to warn all such people that the claims of the Muslimans of India are founded more on religious than political principles. So long as the Jazirat ul Arab, including Palestine and Mesopotamia, are not absolutely freed from non-Muslim influence, and so long as the political and military power of the Khilafat is not fully restored, the Muslimans of India cannot suspend their activities and efforts. And further in the same speech, Mohani says, as regards the Khilafat, the Muslim demands are these, that in the pursuance of the promise of Mr. Lloyd George, Thrace and Smyrna, along with the city of Smyrna, Izmir, should remain under purely Turkish control so that the political status of Khilafatul Muslimin, which is essential for the Khilafat, should suffer no diminution. All non-Turkish control should be removed from Constantinople, the shores of Marmora, and the Dardanelles in order that the Khilafat at Constantinople may not be under non-Muslim control, which is essential for the Khilafat. 3. All naval and military restrictions imposed on the Khilafat should be removed, as otherwise the Khalifa would have no power to enforce his orders. 4. The Jazirat ul Arab, including the Hejaz, Palestine, Mesopotamia, should be free from all non-Muslim influence and not be under British mandate, as it was the deathbed injunction of the Prophet. It should be noted that in the fourth demand, we wish the English to give up their mandate over Mesopotamia and Palestine and to remove their influence from the Hejaz. As to the questions of whether the Arabs will acknowledge the Sheriff of Mecca or the Sultan of Turkey as the Khalifa, or whether the Arab government of Hejaz, Mesopotamia, and Palestine will be independent or under the suzerainty of the Khalifa, these will be decided by the Muslims. We do not want non-Muslim advice and assistance. All these were known to the great Gandhi. So the Moplah massacre. Now Daksh concludes. Daksh Lohia concludes, the Moplah massacre was thus beyond any doubt a jihad approved by Gandhi. And I'm forced to agree because Gandhi played a similar role in 1947. He took a fast unto death in Calcutta when the Hindus for the first time retaliated. He wanted them to lay down arms only just as they began to self-defend themselves. Even right to self-defense was denied, and he in fact even advised women, if they come to rape, then please accept it and close your eyes and let them do it. If they come to kill, then just do Ram Nam and say, okay, in the love, in the name of Hindu-Muslim unity, we are willing to be slaughtered. I cannot think of a more perverse and sadist, masochist man. I don't think there's been any comparable. I don't know how we were also misled by this Mahatma image and glory that they painted around him. And it really does need a psychoanalysis of a serious kind. There is a book, though, but you know, that's a Freudian, bogus Freudian book written by a Westerner. I think Indians need to analyze him, psychoanalyze him very, very thoroughly and very seriously. I'm going to also read questions that may have come. Naveen Kumar had some question. Okay. Mike Shate says, M. Gandhi supported British to fight World War I just few years ago. He was recruiting Indians to go fight on behalf of the British. You have to be a crackpot. Then within no time, he's now supporting Khilafat and going after the Ali brothers. What an opportunistic policy. But it's also, I think, sometimes, you know, what Sandeep Balakrishnan read out from Gandhi's collected works, he seems to have been in love with the Ali brothers. They were macho men. And I think Gandhi's sexual life was very tortured. Because his relationship with women, I mean, he could never stop, even close to death, handling his sexual urges. But it seems he also had homosexual urges. And a lot of people have written about it, including his relationship with Nehru apparently had this dimension, and certainly with Ali brothers, the way he describes them. So, and somebody needs to do an honest research on this particular weakness of Gandhi, among many others, his love for sainthood, for example. Okay, then a question again, what evidence exists on Congress's calculation of using Islamic anger versus simply appeasement? I think the comment, another anti-jihad class says, whims of Gandhi paralleling that of Modi. Okay. BK Singmail says, excellent presentation. Payani Gao wants Advocate Das wants pact on Khilafat and Swaraj movement. Reference, please. So if you can, if what references, I don't know what she wants. And
I didn't hear her question properly. What was that?
It says, can you read it on the screen? It says, reference, please. Pact on Khilafat and Swaraj movement. I don't think there was a pact as such. Gandhi just dragged the Congress in, right?
Yeah, but the details of resolutions are included in Gandhi and Anarchy, written by C. Shankaran Nair, Chetur Shankaran Nair. He was the only Malayali president of All India Congress Committee. He was the so he has written a extensive book that is called Gandhi and Anarchy. Then there is the history of Congress Party written by Pattabi Siddharamaiah.
That's right.
Patabi Siddharamaiah also explains the Khilafat Swaraj cooperation. And there are other books also, like, but they are, my
Yeah.
references basically mostly are Malayalam. I don't know whether that will be useful for her. But
Okay.
there are number of references are there.
I think you should post a bibliography when we publish your article. Then you should post the bibliography or the reading list in Malayalam also. It may encourage people to start translating into English and Hindi.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Then Rama Goyal says excellent analysis about non-role of Congress in freedom movement. I would say it's a perverse role, Rama, not non-role, and of Muslim League and Gandhi in joining together Jugalbandi for creation of Pakistan. Yes, no doubt. There is still Gandhi's blunders in Naukali genocide in Bengal to talk about. Oh, yes, I hope we will bring that dimension too soon. There, okay,
But that was
then
in 1945.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Munmun says this needs to be heard by more Hindus so that they grasp the real possibility of Islamification of India staring us in the face today. Muslims growing their numbers, Hindus going single. Very true. Demographic imbalances are really one of the most serious challenges. And that's why I'm really worried about this two child policy being enforced in some parts of India. Because those who don't believe in the Constitution of India and the rule of law, they've been saying it openly. We only believe in the word of Allah, commandments of our Prophet. They're not going to obey. And Hindus will be punished for, we were already producing, they've come to replacement level, and soon it's going to go down. So we will be actually impacting in a negative manner the demographic growth of Hindus if we impose this policy. It's one of the stupidest ways to go about doing it. There are other ways. I think you have to tackle you can't throw out Rohingyas, illegal. You can't throw out Bangladeshi illegal migrants who have caused this demographic imbalance in some parts of India. But you want two-child policy. How are you going to implement? Are you going to send police in every home to see when, who, what children are born? It's one of the most ridiculous measures I can think of. Silsile Kajol says, where's Silsile's comment? Please bring it back. She said something important about Khilafat. She's been posting comments of Sarojini Naidu, who was urging Hindus to forgive and move on in a typical Gandhian fashion. Sarojini Naidu urges Madras Hindus to forgive the sins of Muslim rioters 17 to 7 times after anti-Hindu genocide of Moplah and Multan massacres. She says Naidu addressed a crowded audience on the beach opposite the Presidency College Madras on October 22, 1922, under the joint auspices of the Khilafat Tamil and Andhra Congress committees. The late Kasturi Ranga Iyengar, editor of the Hindu, VMS, in the chair, and what did she say? I know how the Moplah outbreak in Malabar and the Multan outbreak in the Punjab have embittered the heart of the Hindu people. And then what does she say? Where is it, Silsile? She continues. One second. If the Hindus with their, this is the crux of the matter. Sarojini Naidu's saintly halo. If the Hindus with their great culture, their ideal of satyagraha and their gospel of ahimsa cannot endure to the uttermost and forgive 70 times 7 the sins of any small community, what is the use of all our boast of that which the 3,000 years of culture have taught us? I mean, bizarre to say accept self-decimation simply because you have a great culture. Our great culture is also about Krishna's sermon to Arjun in the middle of war. All our great heroes, Bhagwan Ram, Bhagwan Krishna, Shiv, they all carry weapons. All are Devis. Also, we are Devi Upasaks. We're not masochists that we will not only forgive. The Mahabharat war was fought because their own cousins of Pandavas tried to disrobe, just merely touch her sari and her hair and try to disrobe her. And they are saying we should forgive. And Krishna says this is a necessary dharmic war. And Sarojini Naidu says all the gang rapes, all the abductions, all the humiliations heaped on women, and the burning alive of Hindus and kids and destruction of their homes and habitats and their culture, all this should be forgiven because we're very great people. Yet this kind of sadistic, masochistic advice coming from a woman is particularly hateful. Was anybody punished? Anti-Jihad says, was anybody punished for that genocide? Of course not. They were rewarded. Nobody punished for genocide of Kashmiri Pandits either. Of course not. Not one person yet. Even there's not a single FIR. I'm sure Dr. Tringu will talk about that. So, Ashutosh Jaiswal, will you bring him in? Bharat M says, dear sir, I find most Keralites place themselves higher on the intellectual and secular scale, but how can they be so oblivious to this systematic genocide? This secular scale is what has destroyed us. It's a bastardized version of secularism. France is at least serious about its secularism, and they try to implement it with a measure of seriousness. This is not secularism. This is a bastardized version of enabling and assisting the triumph of a deadly cult, which is out to destroy humanity. And it's carried this kind of footprint everywhere. Are there any questions to Shankudas? Ashutosh Jaiswal, Sri Aurobindo had said on the then, this is very important, on the then Congress leaders Gandhi, Nehru, that current leadership of Congress is one-eyed, if not be called as blind men. True? Very true. Shruti, you had brought some other... There's Avinash Rai asking you a question. I'm more interested in questions to you. Ajay ji, how do you suggest to stop our critical national instruments, all four pillars, from being used by anti-Hindu or anti-India forces in their favor, or freeing us from that alternatively? I would like Shanku and Dr. Ajay Chungu both to answer this question.
Shanku had to say something more also. He was trying to let him complete it.
Yes, please.
No. I will speak after you, sir. You can speak.
Okay. See, I personally feel that it has to start. This whole process has to start from 2-3 realizations. The first realization is that the war form which the Hindus have been facing for the last 1,000 years is a jihadi war form. It has to be understood. It's a relentless war form. It's a one-way process, and it's an irrational war. It has to be faced. We have to prepare ourselves for that. We cannot fight it unless we understand it. The second thing is the state which ultimately was created after the independence of India or the partition of India. That state is at cross with the civilization of India. In fact, I have been saying it for quite some time that Pakistan is a genocidal state, and Indian state is a state based on denial of genocide. It has not responded to the genocidal attrition against the Indians, particularly against the Hindus, right from 1947. What happens to the non-Muslims in Pakistan? It didn't respond. What happened to the non-Muslims in the subsequent in POJK? It didn't respond. It was the responsibility of the Indian state to respond to it. It didn't respond to the genocide of Hindus and Bengalis in Bangladesh. It did not respond to the genocide of Hindus in Kashmir. It is not responding to the building genocidal attrition in West Bengal, Assam, and Kerala. So, unless and until we realize that the state of India is almost at war with the civilization of India, it does not own the civilizational continuity of India and the civilizational responsibility of India. That is the second thing we have to realize. And the third and the last thing which we have to realize is that genocide is not an empirical detail. It is not just a fact. We have to go, all of us have to go through the death immersion. We have to reach the point and feel. Unless our heart tears apart, we'll not be able to fight it. It's not just information. It is something which has been happening to us for 1,000 years. Madhuji, I want to tell you just one thing. I have been an RSS Swayamsevak since 1975. But I want to tell you one thing: the psychological substratum of what Gandhi did, and the statement of Mohan Bhagwat ji that we have the same DNA. The psychological substratum is the same. We want to befool ourselves. We want to believe that something is common, and we should build on that. This is something, and if we go on befooling us, we'll be creating more problems for our own selves. There is no trick. You said that it might have over a period of time developed into a genetic trait. Some sort of a genetic research is to be done. But in the Indian lore, there are two. There is a concept of Asuri Chetana, Rakshasi Chetana, Manvi Chetana, or Devi Chetana. This battle is not, Mahabharat was a battle जहां पे सनातन धर्म की एक परिधि में, the boundaries of Sanatan Dharma were there. Ravana was also a person who had read Vedas. But this is in real sense a battle with a different consciousness plane. There is an entirely different reference work, different reference framework. See, what we recognize as aggression is not recognized as aggression by the Muslims. I'll just give an example and stop here. The day Prophet declared his prophethood and declared Islam, the birth of Islam, that very day all the non-Muslims were aggressors against the Muslims. That very day, by that logic, who is an aggressor in the jihadic concept? Who is an aggressor in the Muslim concept? The person who does not accept Islam as the last word. He is an aggressor. So the concepts of peace, concepts of justice, and concepts of aggression, they're entirely different. So these are two reference frameworks. We cannot understand Islam in our reference framework. And the more we do it, the more self-laceration will create.
I agree with you fully. And I would also add to this, Avinash, in response to your question, which is that you've also been a Sangi. All my 45 years, I see, is stuck at the police station and no. I can understand where you're heading, what you're hinting at. And it is true, Avinash-ji, that Hindus need to prepare for self-defense. Every mohalla, every city, every village has to ready itself for self-defense. We cannot count on the Indian state, and we cannot count on the agencies of the state, namely the police. It's number one, prepare for self-defense. Secondly, which is also very important, start banging at the government. We don't bang at them enough the way Dr. Trungu bangs at them. Too many of us keep quiet thinking, oh, if we criticize the current government, then the enemies of this government will come in. They are our only. No, I'm not saying we want any government to be dislodged, but we certainly want the government to be responsive to security threats, very existential security threats that are faced by Hindus. None of us are safe today. I've never felt so unsafe in India, sitting in my home in Delhi as I do today. It's like decimation is staring at us in the face. Shanku, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I actually wanted to add something like throughout the debate regarding various points that was raised at various time. I wanted to add something like there was a question about giving pension to the people who participated in the Lala or the massacre. In 1971, on the 50th anniversary of Moplah or the Malabar massacre, the government of Kerala, led by C. Achuthamenon, who was a CPI leader, and the alliance was supported by Congress. K. Karunakaran was the Home Minister. The 1971 Achuthamenon ministry decided to give pension to the people who participated in the Malabar massacre. It was considered to be a part of freedom struggle. Again, in 1971, during the same 50th anniversary, a motion was introduced in the Parliament of India. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. And Indira Gandhi government promised that the government of India will consider the people who participated in the Malabar massacre as freedom fighters, and they will be given pension. Later in 1991, E. Ahmad, a member of Muslim League who was the MP from Mallapuram, raised the issue again in Parliament in 1991, saying that an assurance was given to us 20 years before by Indira Gandhi government, but no person has yet received any pension. So the government should look into it. So government of India has already considered them. The Moplah massacre participants are getting 2 pensions, one from state government for freedom fighters, and then from central government, but the real pension was not given to them. Then in 2019, the Ministry of Culture and ICHR, in Indian Council for Historical Research, in 2019 published a directory of martyrs of Indian freedom struggle. And in the directory on the 5th volume, the leaders of the Malabar massacre were included in the list of martyrs. People like Variyangunnathu Kunyamud Haji and all other people who participated in the 1921 Malabar massacre, they were included in the directory of martyrs published by ICHR and Cultural Ministry of Indian government. After protests from Kerala, the 5th volume of the directory was withdrawn from online. But there was no response or direct reaction from the government on the issue. So even today, the status of the people who participated in Malabar massacre are that of freedom fighters, and they are eligible for 2 pensions. Nobody is alive today. 100 years have passed, but that is the current position of the people who participated in this. Then coming to that, Gandhi being aware of the jihadi tendencies involved in this Khilafat movement, Gandhi was well aware, and Swami Shraddhananda has written extensively about that. Swami Shraddhananda has written a book called Inside the Congress. That is a very vehement criticism of Gandhi's role in Khilafat movement. In that he says, in the 1919 Amritsar conference, Maulana Muhammad Ali cited verses from the Quran and instigated the participants to commit jihad. When Swami Shraddhananda brought this to Gandhi's notice, Gandhi consoled him by saying that the kafir in those references are addressed towards the Britishers and not towards Hindus. And Swami Shraddhananda writes that I cautioned him that today it may be the Britishers, but tomorrow it can be the Hindus also, because the word kafir means the non-believers. Again, in 1923, when Swami the letter was written by Maulana Muhammad Ali to the Amir Amanullah of Afghanistan for asking him to attack India. He was arrested by the Britishers and questioned, and he was subsequently released. when he was confronted by the Congress workers in a conference of the Congress party, Swami Shraddhanand asked Mr. Maulana Muhammad Ali, why did you write such a letter? Swami Shraddhanand writes, and he showed me a draft of the letter, and I was shocked beyond proportions to see the Gandhi's handwriting on the draft. So the draft was written by Gandhi himself, inviting Amir Amanullah to attack India. And when Swami Shraddhanand questioned Gandhi regarding this, Gandhi said that I don't remember having written such a letter. Then, when Maulana Muhammad Ali was arrested again, Gandhi did a very passionate speech for the release of Maulana Muhammad Ali, in which he says that if inviting Amir Amanullah of Afghanistan to invade India is Maulana's crime, I am guilty of the same crime, and I will do that again. If the Britishers decide, if the in case of an invasion by the Afghani Amir, and this the Britishers are trying to throw him out, I can declare today and I can promise today that he will not be getting the support of any of the Indian Hindus. That was the statement given by Gandhi. And Gandhi again says that if my brothers are in jail for doing this, I don't know why I'm out today free, because I have done the same thing. This Maulana Gandhi was having this huge this loyalty for Ali brothers. That is why Annie Besant in her letter in the Malabar's agony is provokingly saying that Gandhi and his loved brothers should be brought to Malabar to see for himself what his love for Khilafat has done to the poor Hindus of Malabar. Annie Besant writes that in quote, his loved brothers, she's writing that. But it is very interesting to note that this very same Ali brothers openly disrespected Gandhi in 1924 repeatedly in 3 conferences. Maulana Muhammad Ali makes a statement that no matter how great a person Gandhi may be, I consider him to be lower than the lowest and most heinous of a Muhammadan. Gandhi says that even the lowest of a Muslim is greater than Gandhi. That is what he says. Then in 1926, Maulana Muhammad Ali makes a statement that the Swaraj that is proposed by Congress party is actually Hindu Swaraj, and all Muslims should stay away from the Swaraj movement. And Gandhi writes, I can read that quote. That is a very interesting quote. He says that I asked Mr. Maulana if he had written. Maulana Shaukat Ali is reported to have said that the independence movement is a movement not for Swaraj but for Hindu Raj and against Muslims, and therefore the latter should leave it alone. On reading the report, I wired to the Maulana inquiring whether he was correctly reported. He has kindly replied confirming the report. Saying that I have asked all the Muslims to withdraw from the Swaraj movement because it is intended at establishing Hindu Swaraj. This happens in 1930, because in 1922 the the Khilafat movement has failed. So there was no purpose for sticking with Gandhi anymore. Then they are withdrawing from this movement, and they are openly criticizing Gandhi, saying that even the greatest of your Mahatma is considered to be lesser than the lowest of a Muslim. Gandhi's this contradictory statements regarding this Malabar rebellion is very much obvious. He makes contradictory and contrary statements at many times. Gandhi says that first, when the reports of atrocities committed by the Moplahs reached Delhi in 1921 September, Gandhi says that the brave and God-fearing Muslims of Malabar has done what they think to be right for the religion they think to be righteous. So I cannot condemn them for doing that. But the next month, Gandhi makes a statement that shameful inhumanity proceeds in Malabar. My Muslim brothers has gone mad. But next time, when the issue is raised again by a volunteer from Malabar, I will read you the answer given by Gandhi, and that is the genesis of the statement made by Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Naidu has borrowed this idea from Gandhi. Um, he is saying that the ending of Moplah revolt is a matter not only of urgency but of simple humanity. The Hindus must have the courage and faith to feel that they can protect their religion in spite of such fanatical eruptions. Be the Moplahs be ever so bad, they deserve to be treated as human beings. So all these things have been done by them, but the Hindus should be gracious enough to forgive them and forgive all these fanatic things done by them, and they should be treated as human beings. But next year in January, 4 months back, 4 months later, Gandhi says, again he whitewashes, he says, no Mussalman to my knowledge has ever approved of compulsion. No religion has ever grown by force. So this repeatedly contradictory statements are made by Gandhi throughout the this Malabar massacre. Gandhi's stand has been vehemently criticized by Annie Besant and Annie Besant and Swami Shraddhanand. And one important criticism was done by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I would like to read that because that is also very important. Even B.R. Ambedkar, we were saying that how this Moplah Rebellion actually sabotaged the Indian nationalist movement, because by 1926 it became very much clear that the Hindu-Muslim unity cannot be achieved. This is a myth. Even the Congress president of 1922 openly admitted that Hindu-Muslim unity can never be attained. Mr. Lala Lajpat Rai, I'm sorry, it was not Lala Lajpat Rai. Mr. Rabindranath Tagore, in an article written in April 8 of 1924, says that I cannot trust the Muslims of India in case of an attack by Muslims of a foreign country, because the Muslim men will never fight against their Muslim brothers, even though if, from a foreign country. That is said by him.
You're forgetting one very important thing, Shankudas. Remember when Shraddhanand, Swami Shraddhanand was assassinated,
Yes,
Gandhi justified the killing, and he said he was living up to the best mandate of his faith. That's what I mean. The assassination of Shraddhanand doesn't move him. He doesn't condemn it. But Bhagat Singh throwing a bomb in which nobody got killed is a bad enough crime for Gandhi to not say a word against Bhagat Singh's hanging, public hanging, along with that of two other, one of the most, I mean, among the, but they were, the man was, as I said, a pervert.
Gandhi called Abdul Rashid his brother, the one who assassinated Swami Shraddhanand. Gandhi in his speech said, "My brother Abdul Rashid, I will not make him guilty."
Yes.
So this is the quote by
And the
Ambedkar.
best of lawyers defended Abdul Rashid, including Jinnah, including whoever else. Now, I want to read out some more comments, unless you have something more to say, Shankudas.
I just one quote from Ambedkar.
Please go as much as you want.
Regarding the statements by Gandhi whitewashing these atrocities committed by Moplahs, Ambedkar writes in his books, Writings and Speeches, Pakistan or the Partition of India. Gandhi has never called the Muslims to account even when they have been guilty of gross crimes against Hindus. It is a notorious fact that many prominent Hindus who had offended the religious susceptibilities of Muslims, either by writings or by their part in Shuddhi movement, have been murdered by some fanatic Muslims. The leading Muslims never condemned these criminals. On the contrary, they were hailed as religious martyrs. This attitude of Muslims is understandable. What is not understandable is the attitude of Mr. Gandhi. This is written by Dr. Ambedkar. So there are a number of quotes by leaders of tall stature from the Indian National Congress itself criticizing the role of Gandhi during the Khilafat and this Moplah movement.
I think what we need to do is over the next few years study the role of forces that pushed Gandhi into Mahatmahood. There is no Mahatma. This is a
Yes.
sadist, a masochist, far from a Mahatma. And
There
truth
was a
and non-violence are certainly not his strong points.
there
He
was a
can
there was a
lie, he
there
can cheat.
there, there was a reference regarding Mr. Hasrat Mohani. I would like to read what Swami Shraddhanand wrote about Mr. Hasrat Mohani in Liberator in 26 August 1926. The original resolution condemned the Moplahs wholesale for killing of Hindus and burning of Hindu homes and the forcible conversion to Islam. The Hindu members themselves proposed amendments till it was reduced to condemning only certain individuals who has been guilty of the above crimes. But some of the Muslim leaders could not bear this even. Maulana Fakir and other Maulanas of course opposed the resolution and there was no wonder. But I was surprised and out and out nationalists like Maulana Hasrat Mohani opposed.
What's happening? What's happening? Okay, go on.
I think somebody's phone is ringing. But I was surprised, Swami Shraddhanand writes, but I was surprised. An out and out nationalist like Maulana Hasrat Mohani opposed the resolution on the ground that the Moplah country no longer remained Darul Aman but became Darul Harab, and they suspected the Hindus of collusion with British enemies of the Moplahs. Therefore, the Moplahs were right in presenting the Quran or sword to Hindus. And if the Hindus became Muslims to save themselves from death, it was a voluntary
Yes.
It was a voluntary change of faith and not forcible conversion. Well, even the harmless resolution condemning some of the Moplahs was not unanimously passed, but had to be accepted by a majority of votes only. So this was the position taken by Mr. Hasrat Mohani, who is often described as a nationalist and secular leader.
We should be grateful he's not been given Bharat Ratna. Now, Silsile Kajol writes, in their worldview, someone who doesn't join the jihad is an aggressor. It is shocking. Now, Ramasamy Otisaivu has something important to share by way of information. He writes, Shruti, will you please display it on the screen? Sarojini Naidu's brother, Virendra Chattopadhyay, was a great friend of Muhammad Ali, of Ali brothers fame, and represented the case, the interests of Ali brothers in Russia-sponsored jihad. And he goes on, I think there's more. Is there more by Ramasamy? Anything else? I thought I saw one more.
M.N. Roy, of course, coordinated the Tashkent-based Russian-sponsored jihad
That's
efforts.
right, M.N. Roy. I think
Communist
that
Socialist
was
Islamic
also
Corporation has
posted by
always been
someone
there.
else. And Jamun Gulab says, isn't West Bengal today a kind of centenary replay of the Moplah genocide of Hindus? What was the one before that? Shruti, can you bring it on the screen again? Shruti? I didn't read it. Hello, Shruti? The one before Jamun Gulab, which I read? If she can't hear me, then we go. I don't know if there are any questions. There's Bharat. Is the American nexus with Pakistan of Saudi Arabia?
Mataji, I have added it.
Okay. Ramasamiji says M.N. Roy, of course, coordinated the Tashkent-based Russian-sponsored jihad efforts. And that's something Dr. Chungu talked about. The Communist Socialist Islamist cooperation has always been there. Dr. Chungu, what all you were saying, have you written about it? Or can I urge you to write about it to go along with Shanku Das's article? I urge you to write. We'll present them together. I think together they'll make a stronger statement. Since you've done all the homework, it'll be really nice. Jamun also says, Bharat is the American, etc. Another Mahatma deliberately silent? Question mark. Yes, another Mahatma deliberately silent. Um, at some of the most horrendous atrocities that have taken place and continue to be taking place in Bengal. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing someone, an activist, Hindu activist from Bengal, and I hope to post that soon. I wish I could have done. I should do a live session with him also. I'll do that. Dr. Tringu, your winding up comments before we close this show,
Just
this episode.
uh, just in addition to what you said, we have to also study how is it we have worked on the grassroots. We know even to become a leader of a mohla, how difficult it is. How can a person who comes from South Africa and within 10 years finds himself to be the center stage of the politics of the nation? What were the props which ultimately created Gandhi? That is something which has to be looked into. It's not just his acting or his attire or his postures. There must have been bigger forces who were facilitating his catapulting into the center stage or the central leader of the nation of India. It's not easy to become a leader of a diverse country like India. You have to work very hard. You have to rise from a grass, particularly when you don't have money, when you don't have reach. And at a time when there was no traveling was difficult, it was not so easy. Social media was not there. So I somehow feel something bizarre. How could I? He was not a great orator. He was not a great intellectual. He did not look very good, very impressive. How could he suddenly, simply by donning a dhoti, I don't think he could have become a leader of the country like India, diverse country, a huge country like India. So that needs to be analyzed, and I think more or less.
Yes, I think British archives are bound to give us, if somebody were to actually study this, we're bound to get insights into what forces projected Gandhi the way they did. And also Nehru. Nehru, we know, stole the prime
Certainly,
ministership from
certainly, certainly.
Patel. Nobody wanted him. Nobody in the Congress wanted him, and yet he was imposed on the Congress as prime
There is
minister.
there is
Uh,
there is another interesting thing that Gandhi was active in Indian political arena for 32 years, but he was only arrested for a combined period of 6.5 years. But Savarkar was only active in the political arena for 3 years, but he was arrested for 26 years. He spent his 26 years in jail. So what was that is another question that is often being raised, because if he was such a threat, if he was the real provider of freedom, why didn't the Britishers actually take some fierce steps against him like they did to Savarkar or some other
or Bhagat
leaders?
Singh, or
Yeah,
Bhagat Singh, Bhagat Singh. True. I think truly these are conspiracies that need to be unraveled. And there's another comment. Why is everybody ignoring the affair between capitalists and jihadis? I don't know which capitalists we are talking about. There's many more comments, but I think we have to now wind up. Um, Chanku, you promised that when I give you the manuscript of all that you
sure,
spoke, you
sure,
will
sure.
add as much as you want to add, quote from
Yeah,
the original sources, add whatever, and we'll publish a series of your articles, which may, who knows, become a book. That'll be even nicer. So
yeah.
be prepared to do a series, and we will. And Dr. Trungu, I urge you also to send me the piece that you just spoke out so spontaneously, but because you are one of our scholar activists, you don't talk loosely. You're not just about emoting, but you actually work hard, Dr. Trungu. And we need to make sure that more of your writing is published. So I'm going to nag you more and more. And now I also urge Kajol, you're going to send me a piece on Sarojini Naidu part of this story, and whoever else. I would also like C.P. Ramakrishnan ji, if he's still there, to send me a piece on all that he heard from his grandparents about this story and maybe collect other stories. Today, we wind up here. Thank you, all of you, for staying with us far beyond the assigned time, which was 8:30 closer time. But I didn't have the heart to stop either Dr. Changu or certainly not Shanku Das, because you brought so many new facts and so many new insights into this issue. Friends, please join us tomorrow also. We have another interesting speaker, and this time the program will be in Hindi. There are two Hindi speakers. Tomorrow is Neeraj Atri, and Shruti, please bring the information about other speakers. I posted my email to anybody who wants to send me additional information. Please do use it. Mike Shait has Arabs were in forefront fighting against Khilafat. Read Lawrence of Arabia and History of Arabs from Abdul Wahhab's rebellion against Turk. Wahhab, a founder of modern Arabia and Salafism. Mike, you have previously written for Manushi. Please do contribute another article. Long ago, you wrote. I think it's nearly 2 decades or more. Okay, then. Thank you very much, everybody. And now, Shruti, please inform. And thank you, Shanku, for your very insightful, in-depth presentation. It
Thank you so
needs to
much.
be brought into the English language, and I'll certainly assist you in doing that. And thank you, Dr. Changu, and thank you all those of you who stayed with us till now. Now, Shruti, tomorrow's program and subsequent 2 days. Namaste.